Hello. Hi, Courtney. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
All right. Glad
It's
to be here with you, talking to you about
nice
this.
to see you.
Thank you. Same
It's
here.
we met maybe 6 months ago through Lindenberg Financial, and you continue to impress me with your dedication and your knowledge and your professionalism in helping those who are currently in law enforcement transition to the next phase of life.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about that, as you can tell.
So yeah, so I'm excited to chat more because I don't know a lot about how you got into law enforcement, what you did when you transitioned out. I know we were just chatting a little bit about how you wound up where you're living now. Uh,
Hmm.
but let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit
Sure.
about your career before this career.
Sure. Certainly. So my main career was law enforcement. I conducted and supervised criminal investigations for a large prosecutor's office in New Jersey, and was fortunate enough just to be able to get into my field of choice because it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. There's not thousands of jobs out there like there are maybe in accountancy or business and things of that nature. So it's a challenge just to get into and break into the field, and then to have been so fortunate to have gotten in and really enjoyed and had found that it to be pretty much everything I had hoped it would be. I did a variety of investigative investigations. My bread and butter, so to speak, was white collar crime, financial crimes, and corruption. And that was good because most cops don't want to get involved with that. They view that as pretty boring and a lot of paper oriented, and it is certainly. So when you're able to have a desire to get into that and you do well in it, you could pretty much stay there as long as you want. But I did have the opportunity to do other things there, and especially as I progressed through the ranks from detective to captain over the years, I had it was really very interesting to have the opportunity to work in organized crime. As you know, in New Jersey, we have a smattering of organized crime. Got to listen in on through some wiretaps on the mafia crime families that operate in our area. Also had opportunity to do narcotics work as a supervisor, variety of different narcotics investigations in our county. Quite, hair raising in a lot of ways because you have your detectives' lives on in your hands every time you send them out on an operation. Also was involved with our high tech crime unit as a supervisor. We did every kind of investigation on the computer that you might imagine, including child pornography, financial crimes, and predators. Had an opportunity to also work and get involved with bias crime, the conduction of investigations with bias crime, and then also had the opportunity to teach at our police academy to both recruits and in-service personnel on topics like white-collar crime, cultural awareness, ethics, bias crime, and evasive vehicle operations. So I had a pretty full career during those 25 years I was doing that. Yeah.
A lot of different things that you were able to get involved with.
There was, and I kind of always had in the back of my mind a plan of what I might want to do after law enforcement, even in the early years. So I realized that something like white collar crime, financial crimes would probably be most beneficial if I wanted to parlay that into an opportunity in the corporate world.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I stress with clients about thinking about and planning for what's to come next, even in the earliest stages of your law enforcement career, because you just never know when that might come about. So there are things you can do on the job to get additional training experience and make that transition more seamless.
So it's funny that you say that because I've always wondered at what point in your law enforcement career should you start thinking about what that transition looks like? Is it a year before you're ready to retire? Is it 5 years before, or is it even further back than that?
Um, you might think I'm a little crazy, but I started thinking about it very early on, even in the first 5 years, because first of all, nothing's guaranteed in life. You would hope that you could work to the point where you're eligible for a pension or you reach the mandatory age of retirement. But you also realize that things happen, right? So there can be what I call involuntary termination or ending of your career comes about, perhaps unfortunately as a result of an on-the-job injury or some administrative stuff, or your financial situation changes where this can no longer support your lifestyle, or any number of other possible changes that might occur in your life outside of your job, which might lead you to have to leave the job at a much earlier time than expected. So I think it's important to at least start thinking in those terms early on. And it's important to do it early because depending upon how much of a transition you might want to make, you may need more time to make that transition and get the experience. So if you want to make a complete transition and maybe do something totally unrelated to law enforcement, obviously that's going to require more transition. It might require you to go get a more formal education, certifications and designations that might help you in fields like IT or other areas. And then even if you want to stay within your comfort zone, there are things you could always do during the course of your career. So you seek to get more experience in areas that are relevant. You seek to get more training in areas that are relevant. If you have designs on being in supervision or management, you want to pursue those opportunities in your entity and take managerial training and courses and get that experience. So you can see a lot of that stuff takes a lot of time to develop a good, dossier of experience where you can come out and be prepared, ready to go when that time comes.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there a lot of professional development opportunities for those types of post-retirement roles that professionals could take advantage of in their law enforcement career, or is it something that they typically have to look externally for?
It's both. It's
Okay.
absolutely both. So like I said, you might want to attend additional formal college training outside of work, totally unrelated to what you do in your job. Also, like I said, those certifications are important to have. So you might seek to get those outside of work. Certainly, when it comes to networking, if you're again going to transition into a totally another career, you might want to start building your network of people and entities in those places of possible employment as early as possible. Develop and establish real relationships with those people so you have those connections in place. And then, of course, the things that I mentioned right on the job that you could be doing to again set yourself up for a seamless and effective and efficient transition as possible. And I always stress, don't just have a plan A, have a plan B and have a plan, maybe even a C.
Yeah.
One of the things I originally thought about doing was totally unrelated to law enforcement, happened to be wanting to be a train engineer. And while there wasn't much I can do on the job to further myself in that regard, but there actually was. I met somebody at the gym who was working for the railroad and began to network with him and pick his brain on things that I need to be doing. But as it turned out, that didn't quite work out. So
Okay.
Plan B, I slid into Plan B, and that worked out very well.
It's interesting that you say that too, because just from experience, I know that you never know what connections your connections have. So if you reach out to your network, sometimes they have the connection that you're looking for that next phase of your career. It's not even necessarily someone that you directly know. Have you found that to be effective for your clients to kind of look at their network and reach out for support or ideas?
Networking is so essential, not only to help you do the job while you're on the job. I sought to have connections in financial institutions and law enforcement all over the country to make my job easier, to gain information when necessary and to be able to help them if they needed help as well. So the networking I cannot overly stress, and I'm not talking about just, and I'll date myself here, a Rolodex of business cards, which doesn't really exist anymore. I'm talking about establishing real relationships where you have periodic contact with these people. You begin to know about their personal lives. You may, if it's possible, socialize with them outside of work at either meetings or just you getting together with them and socializing with them establishing real relationships where they're vested in you and you're vested in them, and they all these people exponentially grow your opportunity base, right? So like you said, you have your first degree connections kind of like on LinkedIn, who you're closest to, but then you have second, third degree connections, and you never know where the opportunity may come from. It could very well come from someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows that what you're up to.
Hmm.
So it's important to also to share and put out there amongst your network what you're up to. What is it that you're looking to do? What are you passionate about? What do you see for yourself in the future? So they have that in their back of their mind. And they can say, "Oh, you know what? I just learned about this from talking to a friend that my Steve might want to really be interested in that. He's a perfect candidate for that." And then you slide right into that opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, one of the connections I made from one of my first job outside of law enforcement was a connection that I established probably 35 years earlier that helped
Wow.
lead me to get my first job outside of law enforcement. And it was more than just someone I knew. It was someone I socialized with. We became friends. I worked with a spouse on one of my earlier jobs in the corporate world before I got into law enforcement, and I maintained that relationship, not mostly socially, but as it turned out, beneficially, it helped me get into the insurance world where they were. So
Okay.
again, you never know, someone you meet 35 years ago may be that connection to help you get your next opportunity. Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting too, because you bring up a plan B, and I'm wondering, and clearly you went into insurance. What was that plan B for you, and what did that second career look like?
Plan B was to work in the corporate world, doing investigations, fraud investigations,
Oh,
particularly, whether it be internal or external fraud. So it was very similar to what a lot of what I did in my job with the prosecutor's office with the white collar crime unit. So it became important for me to get as much experience in that area, as much training as I could in that area, join organizations both law enforcement related and outside in the corporate world. Like there's one called ASIS, American Society of Industrial Security. A lot of people from former law enforcement are in there, as well as just people that are in the security investigations industry. So joining those organizations, going to the meetings, meeting those connections, and staying relevant to them and having them relevant to you
mhm.
became very important. So I knew I wanted to work in corporate world, and I didn't necessarily have limited in terms of it. It didn't have to be a financial institution. It could have been like a pharmaceutical company like
Sure.
Johnson and Johnson, a bank, an insurance company. I mean, most big corporate companies have people in those roles, so it really wasn't much of a concern where it was just being able to set myself up to get into that role and be able to just really literally step in when I retired.
So thinking about that, knowing that your plan A and your plan B were really different, what are some of the most common industries or roles that law enforcement professionals step into after retirement?
Good question. And I always kind of stress with people too that you should think outside of your comfort zone. A lot of people in law enforcement don't believe they have skills that are transferable into the private sector to begin with. But then when they realize that they do, they kind of feel they limit like themselves, that they feel that they might have to just do investigations or might have to just do security or executive protection, all things that are really closely related to what we do on the job in law enforcement. And that's all well and good, but if you're just going to feel that that's the only thing you can do, I try and um, dissuade people from feeling that they just have to be stuck in that box, because they don't. I mean, they could do anything they literally want to do. I mean, if a 17 or 18-year-old has the opportunity to do anything they want before them in the world with the proper education experience, so do law enforcement people coming out in their 50s, right?
Yeah.
So you can do anything, and it's a matter of taking an honest self-assessment of what it is that you love and are passionate about and what you have the skills to do. And I kind of say it's nice to look at the intersection of that point, the intersection of what it is you want and love to do versus the things that you are skilled and qualified to do. And where those meet would be a perfect opportunity for you. But again, you can learn new skills, you can get additional education. So it doesn't have to be related to that. Like I said, I wanted to be a train engineer. So, if the opportunity presented itself, I could have been a train engineer. It just didn't work out.
Well, I think that what is so interesting about what you do is that you kind of help professionals figure out what that next step looks like, what they need to do to get there, and then also how to best position themselves to get the job. And I think that last part is really where people underestimate the value that you bring to the table, because that positioning is really key to getting your foot in the door sometimes. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like when someone were to work, if someone were to work with you?
Sure. And I like to operate in the things that you don't know, you don't know. There's a body of knowledge of the things you know, and there's a very small body of knowledge of things you know, but you don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And the greater portion of that area of knowledge is the things you don't know, you don't know. So if you don't know you have an opportunity to do this, or this is available, or that kind of position is available, you can't take any action on it. You can't learn about it. You can't pursue it because it's outside of your radar. It's things you don't know, you don't know. So I like to try and work from that perspective with clients in terms of what it is they might even want to do following law enforcement, and in terms of getting better situated to prepare yourself for the transition. And it's a matter of sometimes you get these aha moments. Like I had a guy who um, was in was in charge of the equipment at a police department, and
Mhm.
he wasn't sure what he wanted to do, and I suggested, what about law enforcement equipment sales? You deal and very familiar with equipment all the time. You buy it, you maintain it. And he said to me, Steve, that's all well and good. I know equipment, but what do I know about salesmanship? I don't know anything about sales. I've been a cop. And I responded to them. I said, what about a time when you went to the scene of a crime and had to get a reluctant witness or victim to tell you what happened? That's salesmanship. Or you convinced an armed or barricaded subject to surrender and go to jail. That's salesmanship. On the times when you got confessions out of a suspect, that's all salesmanship. All very powerful examples of salesmanship, exhibited under conditions of high stress that are far different than any customer salesman interaction to begin with. And then that aha moment comes on and a light comes on, and they say, you know what, Steve, I have been selling throughout my career. I am persuasive. I can communicate in a way that I could sell people stuff. So those are those great moments that I enjoy, and the things you don't know, you don't know. And that was just a small example of one of them. So it's about opening their eyes, getting them to consider their true worth, taking that honest self reflection of themselves. What strengths do they have? What weaknesses do they have? What opportunities exist? What threats exist? The SWOT analysis, as we call it. And those are all things you could work on, right? You can
Yeah.
increase your strengths. You can diminish your weaknesses. You can become more aware of where opportunities exist. And you can also become more aware of the threats, things like the economy, the competition for jobs and things like that. So all those are a work in progress that you can work with. And that's kind of where I come from. And I try and get with them again as early as possible so they can have that in their mindset uh,
Yeah,
uh,
that makes a lot
as
of sense.
early as possible. Yeah.
You almost help them build their confidence to being confident going into submitting their application, to going into the interview process, and giving them those tools to talk about the experiences that they've had in a way that's more relatable for that recruiter.
Right. And this transition is very stressful, especially if you're going from a government position into the corporate world. It's a total different paradigm. You're going from a mission-oriented world into a metrics-oriented world. You're going into a place where You might have to take orders from someone who's half your age. You might be facing stereotypes from lay people in the industry who have these perceptions about how we are as law enforcement officers, especially today with all the negativity that's being thrust upon us, and those present its own challenge. Those are overcomable, but you have to know that they exist. When I was seeking a job as a fraud investigator with an insurance company, I was up against two other attorneys for the final job as a fraud investigator. The hiring manager was an attorney, and it turned out the former hiring manager was from law enforcement and had been treating people kind of nasty, and they were let go. So now that perception was being thrust upon me. I'm the guy from law enforcement who might very well be treating their fellow employees nasty, who might be a liability, who's not going to work well and play in the sandbox nicely with other people, who's not willing to take direction from younger people, especially if you've been a boss yourself, and someone who might want to leave when things get tough because, oh, you have that nice cushy pension, you don't have nothing, you're not really as bound here by the dollar or anything like that. So there's a lot of those obstacles that exist out there that law enforcement people can and may face, and just to be the awareness of them, and they can be overcome in the interview process, as I did. So another perfect example of what kind of preparation, what kind of mindset we want to work with and instill in my clients as they go through this process, and understand what it may be like in a corporate world if that's where they wanted to go. And it may be, and this is fine, it may be that after I give them a thorough indoctrination of what it's like to work in the corporate world, they say, Steve, that's not for me. And
Mhm.
that's great because they've realized it right then and there, not after they've taken a job and now are in a role and have wasted a lot of time, money, and effort to only find out that this environment is not for me. So I have the luxury, because I was in the corporate world 17 years, to know how it's like, what it's like to work there, how do you succeed and advance there, what obstacles and challenges you might face there, and just put that out there so that they can consider that when they make a decision. Because if you just, a lot of times they just want to go think about the money. Oh, we can make a lot more money in the financial world. Let's do that. But you may not want to work in a financial world.
So how, kind of tying this back to why we're chatting today, you work with Lindenberg Financial to help their clients go through that transition. How did you guys get started working together? How do you know the Lindenberg Financial team?
That was an interesting story in and of itself, and it came about through networking. And I went to a job fair, just because I was bored one evening, and I had nothing else to do. So let's go down to job fair. Let's see who's down there. And as it turned out, there were Delaware State Police that had a table there and were recruiting. There were corrections people that had a table that were recruiting. So I started to talk about what I do to these people so that they can impart that information to anybody in their departments that might be looking to transition themselves. So I was giving out business cards, and one of the guys I gave out a business card to was from the Delaware State Police, and can't even think of his name at the particular moment. That person had a conversation with another high-ranking Delaware state trooper who happened to be a client of Lindenberg, and I guess Chris and this client had a conversation about the need for someone like me to be a strategic partner. So around that came that circle that I gave my card to this guy who talked about me to another guy who talked about me to Chris, and who then Chris reached out, and we'd spoken. The rest is history.
So you really don't know what's going to happen when you leverage your network. I mean, the sky's the limit.
I cannot you just never know where these things are going to come from. And I tell my clients all the time, because a lot of people are under the myth that the most efficient and effective way to hunt for jobs is to responding to posted job openings on job boards or through company websites. And it couldn't be further from the truth. That's actually the least effective way of getting hired. More people get hired through what we call the hidden job market. And what's included in there is networking, so that you are not having to push yourself towards opportunities all the time, but through networking and these other non-conventional methods, jobs are pulled to you. So
Yeah.
you're one person who can push, but there may be hundreds of people in your network who can pull for you. And think about that exponentially, how big of a web that is,
Yeah, it's
how far
incredible.
out there that it's boundless, really, how far that goes, because you don't know who's talking about you in your third connection to somebody you don't know, and so on and so forth.
So if someone's thinking about transitions and they want to get in touch with you, what would be the next step?
Well, I'd be happy to speak with them. I offer an opportunity to give me a call, enter into a conversation with anybody who's thinking about being a client. We can talk about what your current situation is, what your desired situation is, what your timetable is, answer any questions that you might have about the process of what I do, maybe so you have an opportunity to hopefully get comfortable and confident with me and how I can be of assistance to you. And I connect with people in a variety of ways. I have my website, which is my company, by the way, is called High Caliber Career Transitions. And my website is www.hc-ct.com. And of course, I have my telephone, which is open to anybody. This is 908-578-2125. And my email address, steve@hc-ct.com. Happy to hear from you. There's no obligation. I'm not pushy. I enlighten you, and you make a decision as
I
to
think
what
that's
what you
awesome.
want to
Please,
do.
if you are looking for support in your transition, please reach out to Steve. We are very proud to be a partner with him. So
Thanks,
thanks, Steve.
Courtney.
This was great.
Thank
It
you
was
very
great to
much.
learn more
Yes,
about your
enjoyable.
background.
Yes, and I hope the listening public at least gets some benefit from it, because it's all about staying relevant for me, giving back for me, and helping my brothers and sisters in law enforcement and the military, as a matter of fact, too.
We'll add Steve's contact information in the notes of this video, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Courtney. Have a
Thanks,
great
Steve.
day.